We are discussing the clamor to replace U.S. President Joe Biden as the Democrat nominee. And that entire clamor is growing by the day. In yet another embarrassing gaffe now, President Biden has referred to Ukraine's President Zelenskyy as Putin. And Putin, of course, as we know, is Zelenskyy's archenemy. And if that wasn't enough, he's ended up calling his own Vice President Kamala Harris as Trump. These gaffes come on the back of a disastrous presidential debate, which has fueled concerns around Biden's age, over his mental fitness to run for president again. Many Democrats, and that includes U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, they've urged Biden to reconsider his decision to run for president this time. Listen in to what they've been saying.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelenskyy. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Well, we've been hearing his gaffes, and yes, there have been a lot of news pieces, a lot of editorial about the possibility of having a president again who, at this point in time, many would indicate these gaffes, many of his motor skills, and those have been growing. So the clamor for him to step down from running as a presidential candidate to challenge Trump has been growing. But what's really happening at this stage? Let's just discuss what's happening in the US in the presidential elections this time. Dr. Kaustubh Mahajan is a consultant neurologist at the SL Raheja Hospital, which is a Fortis associate. And joining him is Adelle Nazarian, a senior fellow at the Gold Institute for International Strategy. Thank you both for joining us on Business at 9 here on ET Now. Dr. Mahajan, we need to know from you first, what is happening to a person, a president, who's making these terrible gaffes, who's losing track of sentences midway? He still remains very resolved to fight the election for the President of the United States. Can you help us understand what's happening to Joe Biden medically? Because all else doesn't make sense.
So it's better to comment what happens in an elderly brain usually.
Yes.
As the age advances, there are 4 changes which happen. Mainly, the circulation to the brain gets less. The brain starts shrinking. And then your memory starts giving you a problem. In the first few months, you will notice that you'll have word finding issues. You will confuse with names. So something of this sort is we are seeing what is happening. And this may progress slowly. Is this dementia? Is this something else? Is this what we call as mild cognitive imbalance? For that, you need to assess the patient's memory. And there's a questionnaire which we do. So unless and until you don't do it with him, we won't be able to confirm. But usually elderly brains can go through these. And there are ways to prevent that from happening.
Well, it is clearly something that has been an ask to test cognitive skills. But the president is not relenting. Adelle Nazarian, how is this playing out in the Democrat camp? Because it's a losing proposition from the signs of it right now. Why are they not able to convince Biden to step down? Looking at the disastrous debate as well.
Well, at this point, it's all hands on deck, attempting to pressure him into stepping down from his position. I think that the reason they're unable to get him to step down isn't really him. It's really his wife, First Lady of the United States, Jill Biden, and his son, believe it or not, Hunter, both of which are gatekeepers of President Biden. And I think that what I've seen is a doubling and tripling and quadrupling down of this, because sometimes when people become drunken with absolute power, in a sense, it's too hard to pull them away from that poison chalice. And at this point, that's what it's happening. It's become poison. And the people who are suffering are the American people. And so I think if enough pressure is mounted, enough people who are Hollywood celebrities, people who the Bidens have known and trust, can continue pressuring them, maybe he will his wife and son will succumb to the pressure and make way for Kamala Harris to go ahead and take over the position of nominee. We'll know in August at the Democratic convention. But I will say this, if she does become the nominee for the Democratic Party, I don't think it's going to be as easy for the Democrats to win this. I think it gives a strategic advantage to Donald Trump.
Well, indeed. And I was looking at your Twitter account as well, and you've spoken about the drastic change that has happened, Adelle, with President Biden, and you're saying that we see a world of difference. You've pinned this, and you're saying this is so wrong. It's elder abuse. You really believe that?
I have to say, I think, look, it's like you're taking someone who obviously was at his prime for 20, 30 plus years in public service. And even George Clooney, I mean, he was present at a fundraiser where they raised tens of millions of dollars for him. And he even said himself, he's not the same person. And when you realize there's a effective change, a clear change in the way someone mentally, cognitively is performing, and they're not at the same level as they used to be, and it's not in their hands, it is a form of abuse because you're forcing a square peg to fit into a round hole. And eventually something's going to break, something's got to give. And it would be unfortunate to see a man who's accomplished so much in his life really be further debilitated because he is a square peg right now. They're trying to fit him into a round hole.
Mahajan, do weigh in on this. If there is this problem, and like Adelle is calling it elder abuse, what is likely the fallout if indeed he carries on, and if he's pushed into carrying on, because it seems like he's not resolute all on his own, he is being made to do that. What is the fallout? Dr. Mahajan? My question to you is, if you persist, then what happens with Biden?
Is it a question to me?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. So first of all, the awareness component in these patients are usually less. They are not aware that they forget. That's the main problem which differentiates a young patient with memory loss with an elderly with memory loss. So they will keep doing mistakes and they will not be aware of it. So that's a problem. And that's why these patients always deny that they have any problems, and that's why they don't go for the questionnaires. So it will be a problem. There will be step-by-step changes which will happen in the brain. Initially, memory issues only of recent memory. Everything in the old memory will be intact, and then there will be behavioral changes. So the fallout is too large.
Yes. So you're expecting further degeneration in a case like this, right?
Yes.
So that's what, and the American people would be very concerned, one would imagine. In fact, we've heard a whole lot of them. We've got a cross-section of views from the American people, the electorate. What are they making of how they see their president right now, and what he's saying about continuing in his fight to beat Trump? Just listen in to their perspective as well.
He reminds me of my elderly grandparents who are in nursing homes and are being taken care of and are resting and are doing what I think our elderly population should be concerned with, which is, living out the remainder years of their lives with dignity and happiness, which I don't think if Biden continues the way that he's going, that's going to happen for him.
Somebody younger, certainly, somebody that has more progressive policy that is doesn't feel like it really is. I feel like there's a lot of issues where his policy isn't actually that different from Republican policy.
Sad it is to watch cognitive decline that we're all experience at our age. So yeah, it is sad and upsetting that he's not seeing it.
Cognitive abilities decline with age. That's not really a surprise. Everybody knows that at some point you got to take your grandparents' keys, probably around the age Joe Biden is.
We have some amazing younger Democratic leaders who would be astoundingly good as leaders.
Going to be 77 myself. I feel my age. Everything's a little creaky. I don't move like I did. He doesn't either. But that doesn't mean we're not with it and we're not capable.
So to move out gracefully, there is a possibility still, right, Adelle? Because here or elsewhere in the world too, whether it's the business world where you move on to a more an ability to kind of guide a company. If you've helmed the company, you would transition into a role where you become a guide, a mentor. You have that in politics as well. In fact, we've seen it over here as one of the leading parties, the BJP, and a Margdarshak Mandal having been set up. As far as Democrats go, is there a basic problem in having gone too far with Biden as their presidential candidate where there is no turning back? Or is this possibility still alive?
Example of the Munder is a perfect example too. I think the Democratic Party has had this problem lately of just going way too far with everything. Even if you take, for example, in America, the stance they take on Hindu Americans, introducing caste legislation that has nothing to do with America's everyday Hindu population, a whole different topic. But I do think that, in generally speaking, yes, it is not too late for them to go ahead and to introduce another candidate, Kamala Harris, presumably maybe Michelle Obama. But what I'm shocked about, frankly, is how they were clamoring and the Democrats were running to invoke the 25th Amendment in order to remove President Trump, who's far more cognitively aware and sharper than President Biden is at his current state, if you compare the two. And now, where is the motion to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Biden, which technically they have a very strong case to do at this point? So I think if push comes to shove, and according to President Biden's latest statement during his tweets and press conference, he has no intention of stepping down, of resigning from his position. I understand it's a hard thing to do, but I think if push comes to shove, as we're approaching the August convention for the Democrats, it will end up being that if he doesn't step aside, they're going to probably find a way to invoke an article of the Constitution that will enact that removal. And so at this point in time, I think it's all about name ID and trying to fix the image that Kamala Harris has, not very well liked among the constituents. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a referendum as to how much do they hate Trump? Is it hate for Trump enough to actually go ahead and to not vote for a person who is probably, if you want to look at it from policy perspective, better for the country and better for the rest of the world to look in a more respectful manner upon America, whose damage has been a little bit damaged, whose reputation has been damaged as of late.
The reputation of the United States is at stake, having Biden as a presidential candidate. But what about Trump? And if it is going to be Kamala Harris who eventually does challenge Trump, is there going to be a revival in that reputation?
That's a great question. I don't think that, I think it'll be kind of not like a Hillary. Even if Hillary Clinton, I think, was president, it would have been probably better than if Kamala Harris was president. She just doesn't have, I think, the charismatic ability or the relationships or the experience to deal at such levels with different, heads of state. I don't think that America's revival will be very grand should she become president, frankly. I think they're going to see through, as a lot of people have, the identity politics. She likes to identify as a Hindu one day or an Indian one day as a Black person. At the end of the day, this whole, the rest of the world doesn't look favorably upon that. They know what's going on. They can read between the lines. And at the end of the day, people should be elected based on their merits. And it is very damaging to see the seeds of discord, discord, like kind of hatred that's being sowed by all this identity politics. And I think that that's left a very bad mark on the rest of the world as in regard to how they see America. So no, I don't necessarily think that a Kamala Harris presidency would help reverse some of the damage that has been done. And of course, Trump has his own flaws. We cannot deny that. But I think when it comes to dealing with Trump, world leaders would prefer it.
You think world leaders would prefer it? Well, already I know about Kamala Harris having reached out to Rahul Gandhi. My colleague Sumita Karir is joining us from the Delhi studios to tell us what that conversation was about. But I want to discuss Trump as well with Dr. Mahajan. I'll come to that in a moment. But Sumita, do tell us about the US Vice President Kamala Harris having spoken with Rahul Gandhi. Tell us about that conversation.
Yes, in fact, Vikram, very interesting conversation that you're having with two of the panelists. And what we're learning from our sources is that leader of opposition now, Rahul Gandhi, and the Vice President Kamala Harris had a telephonic conversation. This happened yesterday, according to what sources are telling us. And of course, we all want to know about the specifics of this conversation, but those are not really known. But important to note that Kamala Harris congratulated Rahul Gandhi on his assuming of the position of leader of the opposition. Remember, this comes in the run-up to the U.S. presidential polls, which are slated for later this year. And as we've also been discussing, there is talk in Democratic Party circles that Harris, of Indian and African heritage, she could step up as a challenger to Donald Trump, as questions remain over whether President Joe Biden should continue as nominee for the remember for presidential election. There have been several gaffes that he's made. The recent one being between President Zelenskyy and President Putin. And of course, we saw what happened with that presidential debate, which was termed as a rural disaster by several watchers and analysts alike.
Considered a total disaster. But of course, there were two people in that debate. It wasn't just Joe Biden. Trump was there, and he is known in the past to shoot his mouth off as well. Sumita, thanks very much for joining us. But turning to you, Dr. Mahajan, when you've seen both of them, you've seen Donald Trump as president, you've seen that presidential debate where Joe Biden was pitted against Donald Trump. It's not like, and Biden has pointed this out himself, that the age difference between the two is not too large. When you see a Donald Trump, how he's saying what he is, what do you make of Donald Trump as well, since we're talking at length about Joe Biden, when you are assessing his abilities too, his cognitive skills as well, what's your assessment, Doctor?
So definitely decision makings are faster with respect to when Trump does, whereas when we see about Biden, it's too slow. And there is a particular algorithm planned in Trump's mind, and he goes according to it. So he's pretty quick in it. So he knows his goals and he takes decisions accordingly. Definitely the cognitive skills, decision making are much better. Only thing is they're sometimes too fast. There is always two types of thinking. And one is slow thinking. That slow thinking should also be considered at times in decision makings. That sometimes doesn't happen with Trump.
Any kind of degeneration as far as Trump is concerned, Doctor?
What?
Have you seen any kind of degeneration in the way thought processes take place and how things are said? Because Donald Trump, through his presidency, here in the media world, we would watch out for what he's going to say in the morning. That would make headlines because everything would grab it. Adelle is smiling largely. Adelle, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's not like Mr. Trump has not, shot his mouth off, and very often.
Oh my God, people would wake up and just...
As of now...
Yeah.
Go ahead, Adelle.
I was just going to say quickly before we go to the doctor, people wake up and just wait to see what Trump's going to tweet out. It was like the highlight of their day. And I just want to add something before we go back to the doctor, like what Sumita said about Kamala Harris calling Rahul Gandhi and congratulating him. It's undermining the current leadership in India, the Bharatiya Janata Party. So it's a constant tactic of interference. It doesn't come from the Republican side, but it comes from the Democratic side. And I think that foreign policy-wise, people are starting to get the gist. They're starting to see it's not the Republican Party that is the hawkish party that tries to sow the seeds of war and begin wars all over the world. It tends to be typically more under Democratic administrations. And I'm so sorry to divert, but please, would love to go back to the conversation with the doctor that you had the question for him.
But Doctor, coming to you again, when you compare the two candidates and many, like in the kind of reaction that we are getting from American people, the electorate over there, they are pointing this out as well, to have this kind of choice because they are two senior citizens. And yes, as far as their abilities are concerned, they are going to be put to the test, as would be expected of a U.S. presidential candidate. So in that sense, just tell us how you think Trump compares, even when you consider Joe Biden and his gaffes.
Yeah. So it's like both of them are not the ideal candidates, and definitely both have their loopholes. If in the ideal scenario, we would like something better in both perspectives. Trump definitely, in the normal brain thinking, there's fast thinking, slow thinking. Fast thinking is which is reflexly done. Most of his actions, most of his decisions are reflex. As a president, we don't want that. We would like things to be sorted out, both sides to be taken, considered, and then a slow thinking decision should be made. This kind of decisions are going to be crucial for an administration in future, which may not happen with the Trump presidency. That is something which I have seen with respect to Trump. And definitely in his case also, we are seeing there is a stubbornness, there's less flexibility. All these things are also signs of not kind of perfect cognitive ability.
So, choosing between two evils, one would have to say, is always going to be a tough task for the American electorate. I don't know what it's finally going to come down to, but at this point in time, it's definitely the reputation of the United States, like Adelle points out, is definitely taking a hit. We will keep watching what happens on this count, but it seems like now we're watching out for one gaffe after another, and that's what's grabbing headlines at this stage for Joe Biden. Adelle, Dr. Mahajan, thank you very much for joining us on this discussion on Business at 9.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.